guys, thank you. Welcome back to the channel. This week is episode 31 of the LookUP verse series. And this episode is brought to you by Jacob Tilley. He goes through and talks about a little bit about Hebrew poetry and how it's written and how we should kind of understand it, just a little bit, and then talks about some verses that I've heard before and thought are some great verses, but applies how we should be reading it and understanding it based on how Hebrew poetry is written. So I think you guys are going to learn a lot. You're going to really like this episode, and I think it'll really help you understand a little better. So without any more, I'm going to let Jacob take the episode away. Hopefully you enjoy. If you want to be a part of this series, Instagram, Facebook, or reach out to us by emailing us at unboundedpursuit@gmail.com. Thanks again for staying tuned each Sunday. Here is episode 31, hoping to hit 52, so enjoy.
Hey y'all, I'm Jacob Tilley. A few weeks ago, my pastor discussed a pretty common passage of scripture, Isaiah 40:28 through 31, and I thought it would be good to share some of the perspectives that he had in his sermon. So I'll start out by just reading the passage. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord, and I'll pause right here to talk about that word hope. In New Living Translation, it's hope. In other translations, it might say wait. But either way, that original word in Hebrew was kavah, and that meant to wait or to bind together. So a lot of times when we read the word wait, we think of it as kind of idly waiting or just sitting and waiting on God. But really, this word means to bind our faith to God and to bind our lives to God's will. So those who wait or hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. So most of us, when we read these verses, really key in on those last few lines, particularly on soaring like wings like eagles. That's the part of the verse that's on all the pictures and the pretty little Facebook things that you scroll past. And that describes our spiritual peak. Those words convey a sense of power, and we constantly strive for that feeling of closeness with God, that feeling of soaring in our relationship with God. But how often do we honestly feel that? I think most of us, that feeling comes pretty rarely, maybe a handful of times in any of our lives. It might come when we've witnessed something miraculous or when we've helped lead a friend to Christ, but we can probably count on our hands how many times we've really felt like we're soaring. So the next line here says, they will run and not grow weary. This seems pretty dull compared to soaring, but it's still awesome. So another side note here, the word run in Hebrew is roots, which doesn't translate to a jog or, light exercise like we might think of running, but rather it translates directly as a king's messenger, running as a king's messenger with great purpose. So significant to not get tired when you're running with that kind of purpose. So now the last line we come to is they will walk and not be faint. This is where we live most of our lives. For most of us, our time is spent in pretty predictable patterns of waking up, going to work, coming home, eating supper, working out, whatever. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to live in a pattern because God works through those everyday walking moments. Our interactions with coworkers, conversations with our family, time spent with our friends, these are the best opportunities a lot of times to show God's love and live out his plan for our lives. So these moments aren't going to feel like we're soaring necessarily, but when we look at how this is written, And when we look at how Hebrew poetry was written, that last line is actually where we should be focusing. So Hebrew poetry oftentimes is written building up to an important last line. So where we might read this as, they will soar on wings like eagles, they will run and not grow weary, they will walk and not be faint, we should be reading that maybe opposite. So they will soar on wings like eagles, they will run and not grow weary, and wow, they will walk and not be faint. They will go through all the trials and tribulations of this life. They will go through their daily pattern of hardship, and they won't be faint. So I think we as hunters maybe can appreciate that concept more than most. So think about those long days trekking through the woods in search of some good deer sign, or a long hike to the crest of a pass, and when you get to the top you hear an elk bugle miles and miles away. You know you got a long day ahead of you. But God gives us the strength in our daily walk to keep going. Even when we know we have many more miles to go, or we might have a lot more obstacles to overcome, God will continue to give us that strength and won't allow us to grow faint. So yes, we'll occasionally feel like we're soaring like eagles, and that is going to be incredible. We're going to look back on our lives and be able to put our finger on those moments and say, wow, I really felt God's presence in those moments. But we shouldn't underestimate, and we need to intentionally appreciate the power of God in our everyday walk when we bind our faith to Him.